and welcome to Dark Hour Paranormal. I am your host, Michael Roser, and this evening, folks, we're going back into the throes of archaeology. Once again with our good friend, Jared Murphy, here to discuss these topics at length, and we'll be focusing on folks, people. And they were around in America before the indigenous folks that we are all familiar with, and there's a couple things that we're going to discuss in the way of discoveries, perhaps recent discoveries if you call it, let's say within the last 10, 14 years, that really showcase that there were civilizations here before the Clovis people 12,000 to 13,000 years ago. Now, the implications here are very stark. They're very real. They're right in front of us on the table. But the problem is it's not just academia that doesn't want to approach this. People, by and large, don't want to be challenged in our own history because it causes us to rewrite it. Now, my question is, why not? We're constantly rewriting what we're doing in way of our own personal history every day. Why not really seek out the truth and then investigate it, analyze it, use your critical thinking, and seeing what's in front of you in way of evidence, which is tangible in archaeology? Why not go further with this? Why put the damper on it and continue to keep our heads down and blind to what we really are and who we are, and perhaps where we came from? Folks, I'm not going to spend too much time with this introduction because you all know Jared Murphy very well. He's been doing some fantastic work. Recently had released a documentary on Stonehenge, and there are many other peripheral ideas and notions within this documentary. I certainly encourage you to go over to notaliens.com on the YouTube channel and check out his latest documentary and other works that he's done and put together because it's fantastic. And, of course, yours truly has written the musical score to his documentary, so maybe you'll enjoy that if you enjoy the music we play here on Dark Hour Paranormal. Very quickly, I've said a hello to most of you in the chat as you were coming in, but I see lots more trickling as well. Joey Hayes, welcome to the show. Dr. Z. Smith, what's up, man? Good to see you, brother. Renee Cruz, longtime supporter, longtime visitor and participant with Dark Hour Paranormal, Third Phase of Moon, Third Phase UFO Report. You've seen his name everywhere. Welcome, Renee Cruz. Cashew Gesundheit, my heart. We're going to go right to the core here. Forget about the extremities. We've been down that. You are my heart, love, and thank you so much for all you do here. Literally, on top of things more than I am. And thank God for her in my life. Let me tell you. Thank you, Cashew. And I see a couple other people here as you're trickling in. We're going to get going here. Exactly Zero. Nice to see you, mate. Welcome to the show. Welcome. Okay, I think we're going to keep going here. Guys, as you come in, I'll say hello to you in the chat as I am able to, as we are going to be very engaged in a deep conversation tonight about archaeology and, of course, our own origins, specifically here in America, but I'm sure we're going to be relating those to other ideas and findings that have been presented throughout the world. So, with all of this in mind, folks, I'd like to bring on Jared Murphy. Give him a nice warm welcome. How you doing, my friend? Great to have you on the show once again, as always.
I'm doing great, fellow composer and researcher.
That's right. Jared is actually a musician as well. For those of you who are not privy to this, and you wouldn't be because you probably haven't heard him play, but I understand he knows his way around a few instruments here.
Oh, well, officially the violin, unofficially the cello, and I was self-teaching piano, but no good. Yeah, the violin first and the cello was something I always wanted to do, but I ended up working towards going professional with the violin. That was fun.
It's a tough road, man.
I know. And then, this is just it's not a business you want to be in. It's a very small community, and some people get very, very technical. Some people play with passion and can also be technical, and there's some people who play very technically and they cannot relax. That's a tough crowd to be around 10 hours
You're absolutely right about that. And also, I'll just mention that when you get into that crowd, there's a very stark division that sometimes gets overlooked. Now, that sounds weird, right? But let me explain. Within your group of musicians, you have those who are composers, and you have those who are performers. And although somebody can perform incredibly well, it doesn't necessarily transpose into composing. And of course, we see this dynamic within the music community. And I found that oddly enough, and maybe you can correct me on this, Jared, being around
Yep.
so many of these folks yourself, I've found that the people who are more performers are much more rigid, a little bit more emotionless in way of perhaps connecting with the music through heart. They use a lot of the analytical stuff, what they're hearing with their left brain to, build this perception of whatever they're presenting. But,
Yeah.
by and large, they're still nice people and they can play a damn good instrument. Just different dynamic, that's all.
Yeah, what's interesting is that we're all drawn to music, and it all goes. I mean, we're not jumping into the show here, but it is frequency, wave, energy. We are all drawn to music for a reason. There's a real power behind it, and we're kind of banging on pots and pans as to its importance. Still, I think a little bit.
Oh God, yes.
But there are people.
Sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead. No.
I was just going to say, if it's still primarily an oral tradition to experience music, then we already are missing a lot of what it has to offer.
Yeah, I think that the people who are very technical, but they're still drawn to music because they can't help not be. And it's great that everyone is drawn, irrelevant to whether or not they play with, which side of the brain or that emotion and that passion that can come through. Emotion and passion, if it's not checked, can sound very, very, very also a little too loose. I mean, you have to stay
somewhat
within
chaotic. Yep, sure.
Yeah. So when you and you know what, you're way more. I'm super impressed with. Okay, so yes, I'm classically trained. I wanted to learn Suzuki. It's a very expensive method, and I did have an ear. I eventually could, but I've always been. This is for everyone listening. You're jumping in on the private conversation. I would look at someone like Michael as what I would call a real musician, because he knows how to play in real bands where they're like play in this play in G, and it's like, what are you talking about? Where's my sheet music? Where's Mozart? And it's like, what do you mean you're just gonna lay a beat down? What are you people doing? It's like, what is this, jazz? I couldn't do that because I play off of sheet music. I play in symphonies. I play in quartets and duets, and it's all very interesting stuff, and you can bring some passion to it, but you have to play as a team that is structured. You get to play in a team that's can free flow and build infinitely with no end, or you can change it. And I've always been super impressed with that, because I on that side, I'm the technical one. You're like I always think that people who do real band stuff are way more artistic. I'm not saying what I do isn't. I have a really, it's like people who do tattoos. How do you get through the blood to do the detail work you do in tattoos?
Right.
And because I do very exact drawing. I do like to draw. That's something you might not know about me, but drawing and pencil and charcoal, but I like very realistic finish.
Me too.
And I'm super impressed also with people who can do tattoos. It's mind blowing. I don't know how you can achieve that detail on skin. Just
with such a flexible medium. I mean, that's something that's always captured my imagination too, Jared. I mean, the people that put tattoos together and the artistry that goes into that. And there was a point in my life that I had sort of pseudo mentored or apprenticed under a guy I was living with who was a tattoo artist. The only problem was his style was more cartoony, and I'm in the vein of where you are, I was looking to do something much more realistic. But he would bring home a pig rump. Okay, we get the skin on it there, and we'd sit in the living room and we just practice working on certain techniques. But man, I have nothing but respect for them as well, because it's not easy, guys. It's not
until
easy.
It started to turn.
Well, funny thing, it kept crying every time I went with the needle. I couldn't figure out where it was coming from, but
and you know what? And side note for everyone listening, like Mysteria, Dragonheart, and Damien and First Floor Audio, and when I'm looking right, it's the only place I can see your commentary. So just so you know, I will try to keep track of that today. It's over here though, so if I'm looking off screen, it's not because I'm bored. It's because I'm going to try to read some of the stuff you guys are throwing down. I know Michael always does a good job of moderating all that, but I thought I would let you guys know that I can see you guys. So hi.
And of course, with that being said, folks, if you have any questions for either myself or Jared or both of us, go ahead and throw those in capitals in the chat. We'll get right to them. It's something I'm becoming a lot more diligent with. And What the hell is this? Well, I'm not gonna bring that up off world. Okay, you make me laugh, but I'm not bringing that into the conversation. We're not gonna get into something like that.
No.
Only because we have so much more to talk to, brother. That was kind of funny.
Yeah.
Well,
There's,
okay, so let's go down this path here
yeah.
of archaeology. All right, so recently you sent me a video, an 18,000-year-old Gault. Okay, now this is in Texas.
Yeah.
Now, one of the really interesting things about this particular presentation that I found was not just what was implied towards the end of the video in way of age, okay? It was the fact that they're already identifying a certain level going down into the soil as belonging to the pre-indigenous Clovis people. Now, in the video, as they're speaking, they're talking about how they go down in this layer and then they continued to work their way down in at what was a pay-to-dig site, I think. I don't know if it still is, if they had mentioned
No.
that, but it certainly was. Okay, so they'd go down and there was nothing within this layer, but they kept digging. Sure enough, they came to some artifacts that are certainly artificial, without question, that are supposedly dated, what was it, between 17,000 and 20,000 years or something like that. Maybe it was, the breadth was even more than that. But that is fascinating. Jared, talk to us a little bit about what is going on with what I had described in this video.
So a lot of what we've done, from the videos you and I have made, from America's Stonehenge to to TerraCore that I just put out about our megalithic past, and the general topic of It's Not Aliens, Worse It's Us, my book, and all the stuff that we've been researching is, we know that there was a highly advanced human society globally around the planet, but simultaneously we're also becoming, we're tabling the realization that Denisovan and Neanderthal were not the only different forms of humanity. A lot of talk around the Paracas elongated skulls, but there were elongated skulls all over the earth. So we have multiple human races that are not coming in order like our Natural History Museum picture shows us. We're looking at periods of time alongside different varieties of humans. We have other humans living around the globe, and in America, and in the classic story of history, in busting this up, we have this story of and Michael Cremo, really got on my radar. There's plenty of videos, but Michael Cremo, Forbidden Archaeology, it's just a really great foundational work. It is not dated. It is not old. It's a great book to have in your library for you to reference, because it was a 9-month job that turned into a decade. And in it is these paleoanthropological finds, and established fact right away is the lower you dig, you always keep finding things. There's never just not anything. It just seems like it just goes on and on and on. So here, the Clovis, which, by the way, random name, there's a reason for it, but it's not a group of people. There's no Clovis people. They just, or they'll say pre-Indians, or like in the video, like our Paleo-Indian. It's like, it just makes no sense. No one is native to...
I'm sorry. Let me help me understand this a little bit. So when they speak about, maybe I'm pulling the term out, Clovis people, they're not talking about one particular group or culture. They're talking about an era.
They're kind of are. They're saying that pre-Indian, there was this mystery group of humans here. They likely came from the Bering Strait, and like in other videos that have to do with the Gault site, one of the things that they point out, and it's great because it's not like mainstream anthropologists, archaeologists don't know this, but you can't take one analysis of one set of bones and say all these people were from Asia, all these people were from Siberia, all these people came, and the consensus used to be, well, before the Bering Strait land bridge, no one was in America. So when they started finding these arrowheads that were all over, we're talking Canada now, we're talking America, and then, of course, further. But they called these people, they're called the Clovis. And they started finding sites, there's sites in California, and they're all over. And they said, okay, this is the group of people that were the first people to make it to America. And they had villages and they did stuff, and maybe there's a few thousand. But remember, in the timeline that we're told, nobody was here pre Younger Dryas. Everybody came down the Bering Strait land bridge, dusted off their loincloths, and got to building pyramids and Tiwanaku and Pumapunku and, well, everything in America and Canada, and populating it all. And just from LiDAR scans and everything else that we're finding, it's like so not true.
Well, they were
But-
considered hunter-gatherers, right? Up
Right.
to a certain point here, yeah.
So Michael Cremo's the first, I think, really widely known. But within other academic circles, quietly, maybe in back rooms, Graham Hancock, just because of not just because of his recent work, but Brian Forrester, it's really well known. It's like, well, you never dig past Clovis. Literally, this was a rule, like at Hogwarts or something. Don't dig past Clovis because, and I quote, you won't find anything. That's why they didn't dig any further. So even though you're not on bedrock, they would dig down to the layer that's supposed to be Clovis, and we're talking everywhere. It was never intentional to dig past what's supposed to be known orthodoxy of our human history. You're not supposed to do that. So in Texas, you have this site that's been destroyed by pay for dig, and basically private landowner owns it, for any of you who are interested. And they just tell you, it's like, do what you want to whatever you find, you pay to dig, you get to keep it. Usually you sign a disclosure that's sometimes the owners still get, if you find a giant box of gold, they're going to take a cut. But basically it was destroyed by private parties because they could just take a shovel and do whatever they wanted. So eventually when, like in this video, they find a floor, and it's a very nice floor. I mean, I'm not saying there's mosaics on it. We're not talking Roman. We're not talking Pompeii, because every time they restore something, Pompeii's back in the news as if it's never existed. But right now,
true.
Right? So they dig down, and mind you, not the whole site. So this one turns out to be one of the biggest Clovis sites anywhere ever in the whole country, and it's in Texas. It's near Austin. And when they find this floor, they start testing organics. There's no way to test stone. But from the organics and what they're positive of, because below the Clovis is supposed to be nothing, then there's a layer of abandonment, as in just like everywhere on Earth. You have to think of very populated places that are abandoned for hundreds or thousands or tens of thousands of years. And then it's a rarity to become a fossil. And then they get reoccupied. And then they get abandoned. And then they get reoccupied. But there can be layers, inches of dirt. Like at America's Stonehenge, when we were there, Dennis was talking about the rate on that windy ass top of that mountain. It's about an inch, and you know how many hundreds of years based on the soil accumulation for that area is different. Well, where we are in Texas, so they dig down, they find this layer, and they're like, this floor is 15 to 18,000 years old, and that was their comfortable minimum for standard academics. Minimum. If they're willing to say that. The test results, I'm not speaking for them, but in most examples that I've seen, if they're willing to say that for out in the ether, then the reality is the number's usually significantly older than that. It's like Göbekli Tepe. Everyone who's listening, you guys you're hearing all these shows. I do not understand this butterfly effect of when I started doing research. Now it's been over 6 years, specifically just on It's Not Aliens, Worse It's Us. There was organic dating at Göbekli Tepe over 35,000 years old.
Jesus.
Screenshot, everyone. If you want one conspiracy out there, when Göbekli Tepe was not going to be able to be written off, and pre-Klaus Schmidt dying, in order to marry it, they started to say, it was weird, the linguistics went from, super chat. No, yeah.
No, I thought that was an interesting comment.
So...
Thanks, Prairie Fire.
Yes.
Prairie Fire. Sorry. Thank you.
What happened was the vernacular over the last few years was, Göbekli Tepe could be 24 to 36,000 years old. Göbekli Tepe could be 18 to 26,000 years old. Göbekli Tepe could be 12 to 18,000 years old. And now every damn show and everything you hear says, well, it's at least 12,000 years old. What the hell happened at 12,000 years? And because it's uncomfortable. It's more acceptable, but just because they're saying it isn't the reality of what they found, and this is an example of that find.
I find it very curious that the number 12,000 keeps coming up. And last night when I had Robert Rivas on and we were speaking about the Pag Triangle, which, essentially is a configuration, scientists believe in their best guess that it's 12,000 years old. There's another person who is, analyzing these stones, saying they were superheated, and his belief is that it might have been extraterrestrial influenced, and he's dating it at about 12,000 years old. You talk to Brian Forrester, and you see these, singes on some of these big constructs out in Egypt, and he's surmising that this might have occurred in one way or another about 12,000 years ago. What's up with 12,000 years?
It's our biblical flood story. It's the Younger Dryas.
Is that all it is?
Yeah, 100%.
Okay.
I'm good with. Before they were like, well, it was about, and there's another vernacular that was for a long time. It was about 13,600 years ago. That was a number that stuck, and it was repeated over and over and over. It was like 13,500 years ago, and then it became a range. Then it became 11 to 14,000 years, and then now the evolution. I think over the last couple of years, people are really comfortable saying, okay, well, we think it's about 12,600 years ago, so give or take. So now they're just saying 12. But the reality is, and also, so what we think of biblical flood, 40 days, 40 nights, whether it was solar flares, like Dr. Robert Schoch's opinions on, there's a lot of different, he's looked at a lot of different things. A lot of people have looked at a lot of different things, whether it's solar flares, whether it was an impact by a meteor or foreign object, or whether it was a artificial, it's not usually out there, but outside of a natural disaster, maybe a world conflict with an ancient society or something. Right. But so we have this event where there's a lot of ice sheets, and this natural disaster, of course, affects those. So there is a lot of speculation when you get into the geology of the Younger Dryas that somewhere, maybe 13,600 years ago, the first initial wave of whatever did hit, but that it was a series of unfortunate liminy, just terrible events for like 1,000 years. That it was just one deluge, one melting ice cap, one giant ice sheet, hyper evaporating and spilling water from lakes and earthquakes, and that it wasn't just one day of bad crap or 1 week, that it was actually many, many, many years once the trigger was set that created this resettling of waterways, land masses, things going underwater, story after story of, we had a city over there 100 miles in the water, and it's there. And we find those things. So we have Egypt, some of it's underwater. Yeah, okay. Yeah, but if you go further, there's megalithic structures that do not correspond to Egyptians or Romans or Mayans. They are foreign to those societies. So the Younger Dryas gets quoted because they're like, yeah, there was clearly not a lot of people left living around here. And, there must be that's the number. It's 11, 12,000 years ago.
If you will forgive my ignorance for just a moment.
Super. I can drink again. Sorry.
This biblical flood that, has been discussed. I've done a little bit of research, but I can't say that I'm very in the know about the science behind this. Was there a flood that encompassed all the land on the earth, or was it, just certain parts that were taken underwater? Some part of me has to think, obviously I don't believe the Noah's Ark story in any shape or form, at least not until I get some other evidence, but I guarantee it'd probably point to a less religious origin. Where would some of these animals have stayed if that was the case? And if there was a flood of that immensity, where did all that water come from? And again, forgive my ignorance, because I'm sure this is something I should probably know, and you guys in the chat might have your own thoughts about this, but I'm very curious.
One of the big theories, and I'm saying this because everyone who's a fan of this subject, they've probably seen Graham Hancock talk about it on shows, which is one of the things that he likes to point out is the giant ice shelves on top of these glaciers that are now, these ice sheets are covering whole sections of the continent. So they're holding massive super lakes of water. And the theory goes that, just imagine if Lake Superior or the Great Lakes were, Game of Thrones 700 feet in the air, and then suddenly the side cracks on the egg, and those waters run out. And
Okay.
so now, if that happened in one area of the world, that could the Indians or the wherever we're at with basically the Caribbean, and I talk a lot about that pyramid that's off the coast of Cuba. That whole area was above water. Now, I think that dates back to Mount Toba going off, the super volcano in
Okay.
plus or minus 75,000 years ago. I think the Younger Dryas really is an aftershock of that event. I think it was so bad. There hasn't been a worse volcanic eruption that we know of, a worldwide geological event. There was nothing worse than the Younger Dryas or Mount Toba going off in our modern times. It
Mm-hmm.
allegedly human breeding pairs. Some estimates are down to 1,000. How they would know that is lame,
Wow.
but I'm going to repeat what's known. Some argue, or some have suggested that it's like 6 to 26,000 breeding pairs of male and female survived Mount Toba going off on the whole planet. That it was absolutely catastrophic. And so the ice ages that would come and the years of issues for tens of thousands of years and into what would be an icing of the planet, which would be the Younger Dryas. Well, the Younger Dryas, referring to whatever the impact was, whatever suddenly melted everything. The Indians, for instance, around where that giant pyramid structure is off of Cuba, they said one day there were mountains and valleys and everything was beautiful. And in their folklore,
Mm-hmm.
and Joseph Campbell talks about this, by the way, too. He's long gone, but the Hero with 1,000 Faces and one of the greatest mythos folk studiers on the planet. He did that great interview with Bill Moyers and Skywalker Ranch, and that'll throw it back if you guys want to go looking for that. But his books are great and still relevant because every society around the world, to answer your question about flooding and when did they happen, every tribal culture, every society has these stories of flooding, and they were dismissed. Oh, well, they live by a river, and that river flooded once, and they remember that. It's not a simultaneous event. It just never happened like that.
Mm-hmm.
And to your point, the Noah flood, they 100% took that. Granted, they made it their own. 100% Sumerian, and
Okay.
we do not have time for that today, folks. But 100%, the Noah is a total jerk. In the original, he has all these people build the boat, and he intentionally leaves everyone behind. It's like, I'm out,
Jerk.
It's like, sorry,
Thanks for your work.
I can't hear you. I'm pulling the ramp. Got to sail.
It's kind of high from up here.
I'm-
Send me a letter.
Try paddling, doggy paddle. You'll make it. I'll
Hey,
throw
you
a
guys know
rope.
how to build a boat? Build a boat.
Yep. Hey, there's still scraps over there. So yeah, they took that story, and the Sumerians had this same world flooded myth. Has a Noah, totally different animal for that story, but you have a worldwide collection. And getting back to the Caribbean, in that city that's 2,300 feet deep, it was in hills and valleys, and I think again it relates more to Mount Toba. I think we're going to be significantly shocked at the age of the megalithic society that was here. And I mean pre even Younger Dryas. That was a decline time, but 13,000 to 75,000 years ago, I think that was definitely a period. And I do think there's a lot of legitimacy in what Solon the Greek heard from the Egyptians about an advanced society that lived approximately 9,000, 10,000 years ago, and that puts it either right at the end of the deluges or maybe they have their years wrong, but again, there's significant evidence that even these indigenous people that are living in Brazil and living in Central America, they had stories, and this is their half full story. The story goes, well, there was hills and valleys and mountains, and then one day the gods blessed us with fish, and we had islands. I mean, that's a half full. It's like a lot of us got wiped out, but hey, we got fish, and we don't have to boat as far to get them.
That's still a nice sunset too.
But it's like culture after culture all talking about this massive disaster and constantly being dismissed by mainstream academics, which was even recognized by Joseph Campbell and a lot of other people, where, hey, I don't think you should disrespect all these indigenous peoples and societies that are gone, that are all recording uh, all these accurate events in these other areas, and they're all saying in their history, in their words, something happened and everything got sunk or is out in the water 100 miles that way or 50 miles that way. It's like, we know that this town, like on the coast of India, when Graham Hancock went diving for that city off the coast of India, that everyone on shore knows, well, we're the survivors of a catastrophic event. But again, what we knew about geology in the 90s was that in order for a city to be off the coast of India at that distance, not accounting for hydrostatic plate shifting, and that's a theory, but that city would have only been above water if it was 30-ish thousand years ago. And so we really have this period where, did Mount Toba go off 75,000 years ago, create a nuclear winter, whole bunch of stuff got frozen and apparently got ice agey. But what was it like pre that? Were these cities dating from that period? Were they dating from all the water got sucked into these glacial situations, and then shorelines were just lower, and it was all societies rising up, 74,000 years ago to 60,000 years ago to 40,000 years ago? That's an unknown, because most of what we need to look at is underwater, except for we have this big blank slate, America. And what's interesting then is, if America is what we think is open plains, there was, Clovis were here, and I did catch thank you for the Clovis clarification, but this group of people was here, but it was all hunter-gatherers, nothing sophisticated.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that doesn't explain the Montana dolmens, the very weird acoustical properties of multiple singing rock mountains, dolmens found all over the country outside of Montana. And the Montana dolmens are crazy interesting. But I think there's too much missing, including the floor at the Gault site near Austin, where you have a society that's building a sophisticated structure with an 18,000 plus maybe 20 or 30,000 year old floor. So what does that say about what layer of earth do we need to be at, and where around the country do we need to revisit those stories? And yeah, it's a real low hanging fruit for everyone out there. Yes, I will say the words mounds, like Mound, Minnesota, the mound culture, that's Ohio to North South Dakota. Well, there's quite a few mounds, but not the Vikings. We're not going to go that recent.
Well, this is very curious, that, we talk about, the dolmens that are found and other archaeological evidence that points to everything is much older, and there were all these different civilizations and cultures that came before what we already are familiar with and can concretely say existed at some point in time. All right, obviously a broad pinpoint in way of, putting your thumb on it. What is the real threat to us as a society today to find out that we lived in America 30, 40, 50, 60, 70,000 years ago with our own civilizations? I mean, what's the worst that's going to happen here in way of, discovering that maybe these people had certain ancient technologies and they could move stones in a way that perhaps we don't utilize or are not developed in based on our own decisions of where we wanted to go mechanically? What's the biggest threat here to digging deeper into the earth and really finding some of these older artifacts?
It's interesting because part of the question is tying into everybody like kind of going at each other in the chat. That is the threat. You have people, we're very tribal in nature. There's a lot of theories that humans work best I think in survivor mode, and we have genetic memory, and when I say that, usually it conjures up the idea of, like, to me it conjures up the idea of tens of thousands of ancient superhumans, but that's not always the case. It's like literally you get memories from your mom and your grandparents, and it goes back just generationally in the last few thousand years. So people become attached, and even romantically attached to, for instance, in America, it's, well, there's native peoples, and it's like literally just for everyone to listen here. No, even if I'm part Irish and French. I was born in Germany, but there are people who would say that they are German, that they're Irish, that they're French. Um, they might make claims to being, pick a sub whatever human, pick one that you are. But no one is from anywhere. We are all transplants. There are no Native Americans. There are no Native Germans. There are no Native Asiatic societies that were always there first. This is the problem. If you accept that the Vikings were in the ruin stone in Minnesota and Alexandria is real, well, then the Vikings were here, which is well proven now. Scott Walter's done a great job of that.
Yep.
If you accept that the Bay of Amphora jars in Brazil is real, then you have to accept that the Romans were trading in Brazil before the Portuguese discovered it. So we have a couple things going on. I mentioned the chat, and I mentioned, in this case, Brazil. There is national pride. I don't know if it's just for some academics. I mean, I think there's a spectrum of people. Take the internet. They're kind and rude. And I mean, there's this whole spectrum of people that are here. And there's a lot of different really erroneous reasons sometimes to say, well, we discovered Brazil. Well, first off, what about the people who are already in Brazil before you, in quotes, discovered them? And secondly, are they the original people? Because the Aztecs said, well, the gods built these ruins. So these megalithic structures were not built by the Aztecs. The Mayans said the gods built this. The Greeks, you think you're Greek? The Greeks literally said, like the Temple of Delphi, that's my screensaver. And they're like, well, the gods built this place first. I mean, you have Malta and Sardinia and crazy, ancient, mysterious megalithic ruins all over the earth, including those stone spheres that show up in San Francisco. So who was in America and who was in South America 30, 40, 50, 100,000 years ago? To claim that you're native to a place means ownership. And there's a period in time where we've all come from somewhere and we're all part of a larger human story. And for some people, I think the brutal truth is that it's a story that I'm sure it's really sad. I mean, we have clearly geologically, when you look at this planet, have been smacked with horrible tragedy. I mean, I think it's really hard to think, okay, one, we're all the same people. We're all together. We all died and lived through. Our species has, it's incredible what we've gone through. And it's not just one time. It seems like over, and we're not talking the 26th. Yeah, right. Not the 26,000 year cycle. That's a metaphor.
Right.
And it was mentioned in the chat. Did the culture that Solon talked about, which I will not say their names anymore, because in an ancient advanced society that had 10 cities. I mean, 10 cities. Is it allegorical? Is it just 10 sounds like a good number? 777, 666. The reality is that the slivers of truths in all these legends need to be put on a table or found or sifted for, as we accept that there's not just one stone floor at the Gault site near Austin. There could be a whole city.
Well, that's curious that you have all of these. Okay, so take our civilization, for example. We look at this, we're born into it. As far as we can see back, it's been developing, and we are where we are, and we're going where we're going. The truth of the matter is, because of the age of this particular planet and the multitude of different cultures that have traversed its surface, very well, there could have been some very large civilizations that had full capabilities of society like we do today, but perhaps differently, still maybe as effective as what we're doing, but again, in a different way. And
Yeah.
once they died out, that land wasn't inhabited for time. The soil sat, the weather, took
Right.
things down. And next thing you know, the next civilization that embarks upon that land thinks, oh, wow, this is untraversed land. This is pure. Nobody's ever been here before. And the cycle continues to repeat itself. I
Yep.
think now it's harder for us to wrap our head around this idea because we're so global. And again,
Yep.
I'm not saying that every country is working with each other, although they do in certain respects, mostly in a political sense. But because everything is inhabited, or at least, there are very few corners of the globe that you can go safely, that nobody's been there or nobody's there right now, back then things must have seemed much larger to some of these people. But I have to keep in mind that even this stone that was found in the 18,000-year-old Gault in Texas is cardinally aligned to, I forget, what was it a celestial body or was it a star system? I can't recall, but it is cardinally aligned. And how the hell does that happen if there's not some sort of intentional interference in that creation?
Yeah, it's so when it's 2018, 2017, the Guatemalan Lidar scans. And I think one of the things that I have a trouble with news, as a side note for everyone, is, we have a headline, something happens, and there's never a follow-up to the story. So for everyone listening, it's on the table, Not Aliens. I'm going to be starting a news show that's going to keep covering these things, and we're not going to let those stop. We'll have headlines that run, but we'll do new news stories every week. I'm working out a date for that, but I'm going to start that where we don't let some of these issues drop. But a good example is the Guatemalan Lidar scans. They're scanning what's going to be an 8,000 triangle, 8,000 basically, it's not square, a triangle shape of 8,000 square miles of jungle that's uninhabited. And of course, as you all know, they found 60,000 buildings. Now, for all of those listening about Indigenous and Clovis and America and who is here, now here's the narrative really fast for you again as you walk through as a child at the Natural History Museum. Everyone in loincloths who was wrapped in the saber-toothed tiger bling bling and mammoth Patagonia walked their asses down to America and built everything in South America. And when I was growing up, 30 years ago, it was easily said that they estimated, follow this, 6 to 8 million people on from basically Alaska to South America.
Yeah, I wanted to talk to you about this. I'm glad you brought this up in more detail here.
So let's fast forward. Now that number's gone up a little bit, but they're like, there just really wasn't that many people. Okay, but what do we already know and we've already talked about? For those that don't, there are large 800-ton, 100-ton, 70-ton, multi-sided, complex, extremely advanced, crazy interesting buildings built in South America, all the way through Central America, into America, with even stone spheres being found when they were building streetcars in San Francisco. And so way older than the Gault floor. But they do the Guatemalan Lidar scans. They find 60,000 buildings. And something that Central American, South American archaeologists get to actually own and get to school academia on is they said, we have, in quotes, I wrote about this in my book, we have grossly underestimated the populations of Central and South America. We could, and this is them saying it publicly through National Geographic, we could safely assume there are 15 to 20 million people here based on the just based on what they're finding, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But there's the issue. They're not done scanning and kind of mums the word on the society. You have the Incas. Well, the gods built these megalithic structures. The Greeks, the gods built these megalithic structures. It's all over the planet. It's the same construction. So, but let's just stick with South America, where all of America's, from what Columbus did not discover to where the Vikings went and the Templars and these dolmen people and whoever built America's Stonehenge, and all the other sites that are just as mysterious that go up into Canada to Alaska and off coast, we're not even talking about what's underwater, let alone buried, or Some of the oldest anatomically correct humans were found in Table Mountain in California. And Michael Cremo talks on and on. We're talking 60 million year old humans, 40, 60 million years old. But let's skip all that and just stick with the 20 million. Again, think of the venue that they're talking about it in, National Geographic. It's now supposed to be a conservative, support the standard academic mainstream. We found 60,000 buildings, and it turns out we're not even close to being done. They did out of 8,000 square miles, they did it in 500.
My God.
500 square miles is what they found for those 60,000 structures. And super highways that are wider than anything we do today. So what's the real number? 100 million? 200 million? You know, that's just Guatemala. And I know even if you guys can't place Guatemala on a map, I mean, sometimes it's hard to like catch up with geography again. It ain't a big country, but it's in an area where there's a lot of things that we keep crediting to Aztec, Mayans, Olmecs, Toltecs. There's a number of other peoples that I never mentioned. I mean, it would sound like, Billy Joel, we didn't start the fire, if I was to name off every indigenous people. But just to give you that example, for those of you looking to lay claim to a continent and saying, well, in the last 2,000, 3,000, 4,000, 6,000 years, it's only been, in quotes, my people, fill in the blank continent. It isn't. That makes people angry to keep answering one of your other questions. Sometimes it frustrates people. Sometimes it scares them. You're telling me the Noah Ark story is actually a Sumerian story. Well, you know that, but you don't want to. You don't want to deal with it. It makes you question your spirituality. You don't have to question. You don't have to question your spirituality. You can keep that, but when you dig, you find the truth, and the truth apparently does not set some people free.
Keeping your head down, staying blind. As I was mentioning earlier, it's the same thing, different words here. People don't want to accept that there is a challenge in front of them. And that, to me, is kind of the funniest part, because as far as I'm concerned, one of the things that have stayed consistent in my life through all of the thick and thin is a challenge, okay? I've always had challenges in front of me. I'm sure you've had challenges. Every single person in this chat listening to this show right now is faced with challenges either every day, every month, every year, persisting, temporary, whatever the case. These are the elements that create what we're doing here in life and how we grow. I mean, we often hear this. It's very cliche at this point, you know what I mean? But the struggle will make you stronger, and it not only makes you stronger, but it points you into the direction of what you prefer and what you don't prefer. Yeah. So, when you have all of these people who are essentially scared, in my opinion, to make a step forward. We're not even talking about taking a jump, leap into the abyss, nothing like that. Just take a single step forward and see how that ground feels, and realize that ground actually has some solidity to it. And if you want to find out where we came from, who we really are, and as much as people say they do, you gotta abandon the fear and allow the world around you to shift and change into what it truly is, instead of our outward perception of what it should be, because that's what it is right now.
Yeah, and it's really interesting. There's been some very simplex elementary arguments about race, and the reality is that we've talked, I mean, it goes without saying, collective human consciousness, in the ether, we are not connected despite our differences. There's literally no differences. As a human race goes, we are connected to a collective consciousness that individually we have different access to based on where we're at with our own journey and our own path. And irrelevant, super sticker. I just saw super sticker. There was another super sticker. Yeah, super sticker. I can't hear you. You turned off.
So sorry, I do that to be polite, and oftentimes, more than often, I forget that it's. Hey, Misty Super. Hold on.
Mysteria Dragonheart.
Mysteria Dragonheart. You've got a couple handles there. Thank you so much for your $1.99 super chat. Always a supporting member of Dark Hour Paranormal here. Misty has been with us for so many years, as many of you have been here since the beginning. I've noticed a handful of folks coming into the chat. Hey, thank you so much for the super sticker. Jared, please continue, mate.
Yeah, I mean,
Thank you.
so here's the optimistic thing. Here's the frustrating thing. We all have a personal, like, last few hundred years, couple generations, a few thousand years. You can claim whether you're, are you Germanic from the barbarian tribes? Are you, can you date all of it? Here's something rarely ever talked about: Tartaria. I mean, how much of what we think of Europe was really Tartarian? And what did that look like? Was it, more Asiatic? Was it more Greek, or was it more Arabian? I mean, was it more like the Ottoman Empire? I mean, what was Tartaria like back in the day when it controlled? I mean, this is literally an area we don't even talk about. An empire larger than the Roman one, and pre-Greek, and spanning from Siberia through all of Europe. And we have no eyes on it, and we rarely talk about it, but yet it's even a country that's noted on maps. And it's significant because when we label ourselves individually, it's like we can get back to our grandparents and figure a few things out. But what's really important about our history is that it is a search and rescue. It's not a search and recovery.
Yes.
It's not about you just identifying one tribe, one this, one that. It's
finish out, and then we'll get to this one.
So the idea of a collective human consciousness that we can tap into, not just unconsciously, but consciously, to reactivate unconscious stored genetic memories, to also help us in our meditations and in our personal development on this journey that we're on now in each whatever body we've been given, to reconnect, to continue spiraling up in consciousness. Not just because you're more aware of a leaf falling to the ground in some lotus flower anime sort of way, but literally the connectiveness with the universe in your ability to create harmony, not only within yourself, but within that collective consciousness. I think there is a piece that we can achieve. I'm sounding idealistic, but I think in finding our past, and again, every layer of humanity is interesting and important, but the layer that reactivates the 85% or 90% of unconsciousness that we've slipped into, the numbness, the safe mode, we want to find the culture that we were at before we started to lose all of it. We want to find who's the society that was terraforming the planet and creating engineered soils, engineered constructions that manage not only earthquakes but frequencies and wave technology. Who are these people that had a third eye that wasn't painted on their forehead but actually functioned? That society is our society. We've been frozen in time. Wherever you are on the planet, and again, lots of bad things have happened to lots of people on this planet for literally as long as we could sharpen a pointed stick and stick it into the nearest living thing, to quote the Boomer Bible, which, by the way, is one of the funniest things ever written. And if you guys enjoy history, it's out of print, but look for the Boomer Bible. It's one of the funniest things ever written because it's the history of humanity, and I just threw that out there. So the pointed stick thing is just that, we've digressed into this numbness, into this 10 to 15% consciousness, and we bang on the blinky board and we might get hey, I just had an out-of-body experience. Or you bang on the blinky board and you get really, really fit, and you're like, I had this total Zen moment and I saw like geometric shapes, or my meditation's gone this way, or I've hit a combo of things, but it's like juggling all these balls, and then you try to connect collectively, and then you do it through the group you meet. You gravitate towards a philosophy, you gravitate towards a group, you gravitate in a way like Sufism. I have a friend who's a Sufi, and I mean, it's mind-blowing. Collective dreaming, 40 guys, 30
That's
mystics
crazy.
sharing a dream. And there are people who I personally have not done it. I'm not telling anyone to do ayahuasca. However, I know people who have done it that have talked about, like New Earth Lady and Graham Hancock. They've talked about collective dream states where they've been in that place, and there is a shared experience with other people doing that together. And what I think is going on is we're all connecting to this, what is now an unconscious, what we're calling superhero, we're calling Marvel comic-y. We've mutated it into something like, well, like them or hate them, Marvel comics are fun and entertaining. But we've taken ancient frequency, energy, genetic technologies that were once a conscious uh, ability within us, and we've mystified it, deified it. Merlin the magician, it would look like magic when you have nanobots. We
Mm-hmm.
don't recognize that. We don't recognize ancient flash drives. We don't reckon why are they always working with crystal? Why are all these buildings with huge crystalline contents? We're we've digressed where you could nitpick. We could argue for days and weeks and out forever. We could have a show forever just talking about the last 1,000 years, last 600 years, whatever, fill in the blank. But it's all a distraction. So this answers part of a question you had earlier also, which is the powers that be. There's national pride, like Portugal discovered Brazil. No, you didn't. Not to mention the people there didn't want to be discovered to begin with, that had occupied the ancient megalithic ruins that had been abandoned or destroyed. Those people probably didn't want to abandon or get destroyed. But we have a long history of not wanting to acknowledge prior cultures. It, we've done bad things to each other, but we've done good things too. But either way, it doesn't help the people who are in power now do anything. There's no benefit. It doesn't affect your mortgages or buying a car, or there are so many obvious low-hanging fruit reasons why, if you don't go digging in the past, or you have a system like Wim Hof or Stig Severinsen and breathology or the Wim Hof method, where you're reactivating and controlling your inflammatory response. What drug company wants you to control your inflammatory response with breathing for 20 minutes? That's not helpful.
It's curious that you're bringing up, some of, well, how do I want to put this? If we were to find that some of these ancient civilizations were building constructs using auditory levitation or something along those esoteric lines, I would think that as a population, as a species, we'd want to remember that specific aspect, and then, knowing us in this day and age, manipulate it. It really blows my mind that they'd rather keep some of this stuff secret and tucked in the back, unless understanding that technology leads to some other larger truth.
Yeah, I think that the people, we're not going to digress, and we're all on a format right now, folks, for everyone chatting. We're on a format where we can only say certain things. And on that note, there's a system of government that's in place that when you're only 10 to 15% conscious, no matter what you do, there's kind of a limit. For all those listening, have you guys ever talked to anyone? I'm a very questioning person, and it's okay if you're not like this, but I am going to out a group of people. I've heard this before in dialogues where somebody will say, I've kind of done everything. I'm kind of bored.
I've heard people say this before.
And I sit there privately inside my head and go, are you insane? How is that even possible? We don't even know what's in the bottom of the ocean.
With the boundaries that we've given ourselves, especially within our personal lives, what we've allowed ourselves to question and research, I think a lot of that stems from, this idea.
And that's fine if you really are at your limits, but there are people like, okay, it comes up a lot when people do, I wouldn't want to live forever. I'd be bored. I'm already bored. I'm like, you're bored. You've been to Mars. You've lived on a house on the moon, and then you've left the solar system. You know what's on the bottom of the planet. You've figured everything out. We don't even know what's going on the planet in reference to our megalithic past, and then we're reactivating these, in quotes, superhuman abilities, and we're achieving this collective consciousness. People can feel it. It's almost like a static electricity.
Yes.
And we have a woo-woo feeling and description of it, but it's an actual thing that's happening. And reactivating these technologies are not in that current power structures system. But when you're 25% conscious, instead of even forget 100%, let's just raise it 10%. What happens then? Do you will cancer away? Do you never get sick again? Do you slow or eliminate your aging process? Do you not need a cell phone, and can you directly connect with people again? Can you collectively dream again? Can you consciously walk and and connect with that pineal gland? Can it actually function? Can you experience what you call nature, the biological technical system that it is within what was once a terraformed global system? And what does it all look like as you realize that you're walking around in a giant, spaceship, and it's not just a natural environment that you're like, that's just the dining room. Well, that was the weapons control for what you were, but you don't remember that. You don't, or this is the surgical room where we put people together that accidentally blew up, and that's not a problem, but it is now. It's like you blow up, you're gone. I mean, these are extreme examples, but the reality is that going back and re-engineering these ancient technologies and really looking at our past and not worrying about, well, I have a large system, and this is the way I make money, and I don't want to change that. And it's worked for 100 years, 200 years, 300 years, 400 years, or this conflict with this group of people has worked for this long. Why let that conflict stop you from reactivating your consciousness? Or why let your one esoteric anchor be, well, it has to be this way? Well, here's the deal. No matter what you personally believe, this is a side note as you go out searching for yourself and answering these questions, I always kind of take any personal belief I have and gauge it against the totality of the system. Not the popularity of it, but the totality of the system. Like, basic elementary question. Well, which religion's right? Well, how about none of them? Maybe. But...
Maybe.
But...
Sorry.
I know, right? But the experience that, one, we are all connected. Two, everybody has pieces of truths. Like, there are things that you can dig into any specific philosophy. There's a safe word. And there are similarities. And you're like, well, it's like the bumper stickers with all the symbols on it for peace. And the reality is that you're banging on a very ancient, broken, advanced system that's working, no matter what your personal philosophy is. But at the end, that system isn't quite whole. And you look over at that other philosophy and you go, that philosophy has something right. That one has something right. And then I know there's this thing that I've just experienced in a dream or in a meditation or in an experience that I've reached a higher level. And I'm like, well, that's right. So how can all these pieces be right, but not one system's right? Well, because you don't know what the original system was. Mm-hmm. That's the problem with not knowing our past. That's the problem. That's the difference between a search and rescue and a search and recovery.
Excuse me. Well, maybe in discovering all of these archaeological evidences, if you will, that point back to us living perhaps millions of years on the planet before we ever thought we existed, again, we'll point to other implications that open up larger Pandora's boxes that perhaps, it's like unraveling that one bit of yarn or that one thread from the sweater. You pull on it, the whole thing will just come undone. Now, while I do believe that there is an element of that, I think that, there could be some compartmentalization in way of at least allowing us to find this stuff out for ourselves. I understand that there may be some inherent fear from those in control that once we gain our own personal power and we realize how powerful we are, not only as individuals, but collectively, it could present somewhat of a problem for the paradigm that we're living in. But at the same time, we also understand that everything is in constant flux, and those who are in charge and in control will not always be in charge and control. They've done a very good job for the time that they have in way of keeping stuff secret and keeping people away from what they're doing. But again, the long story short here is that we are still all one. We are still connected to the planet. Where the planet goes in way of vibration, we go. So it doesn't matter if they're on another a vibrational plane of existence in that way. If they're still connected to the Earth, they have to ascend in some way, shape, or form too. That is really the biggest conundrum that I have when it comes to the human population, is that we want so deeply to be connected with each other. And there's an inherent understanding that there's a consciousness that does naturally connect each other. And yet, we're so happy to divide each other and compartmentalize and segregate and define in way of identity over whatever the case may be. It's a living contradiction to me. We're so dynamic in that way, but we're a living, walking contradiction in so many ways.
You just put me on a new thought, and that is why. What is one of the reasons I hadn't thought of for the fear of trying or expanding your own mind?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it's another reason my argument about it actually is a new angle on why our history is so importantly a search and rescue. Because I grew up Catholic, just for everyone. And boy, there's a lot of traditions with that. If you're looking for a solid foundation in that particular genre of faith, doesn't get better than being Catholic. I mean, you are straight up, ancient, highly ritualistic. Well,
Yes.
Pope, Rome. It's very well structured. It's like going to a super cool old big building university. And that's very established. So what happens when you have questions and they can answer the questions? And what happens when you have other ideas and you read new things and you learn about another philosophy, or I'm going to say Sufism again. What happens when you learn something like that, or learn Buddhism, or learn Hinduism, and which really there isn't Hinduism, but whatever, arguments aside, the issue is when you step out of whatever your background is and you start experiencing something new and start trying a meditation irrelevant to the meditation's origin, Tibetan or some other yoga philosophy. I mean, that's real popular right now. But you try something new, not Wim Hof, but whatever it is, it's outside of what you were learning when you were a kid, brought up in, and you're grounded and you feel. I'm walking through what I was thinking when you were talking, or felt. I didn't think it, I was feeling it, and I'm talking it out here for everyone. Bear with me for a second. So I think people get so uncomfortable because when you step out on the precipice of what you don't know, it's the unknown is scary, which is an obvious point, but something that had never occurred to me before. The more you know that there is something beyond, even if you don't know what it is, like it's like having that solid faith or philosophy, and there's other truths. You don't know why, but there's other truths. So you could explore it, but you still have this anchor.
Yes.
But when you explore all of it, and we keep digging up 18,000-year-old floors, 30,000-year-old structures that we're trying to say aren't that old. But when we look at everything and what's underwater that is megalithic and genetic abilities and cuts and all the things that we've talked about from that collective consciousness and the ways that we've banged on the blinky boards and experienced it, if we keep tabling all the facts that we're finding, when you have a meditation that has you astroplane, or when you have an experience of lifting a car off of a baby, or there's so many classic stories of like, some tiny person saves like somebody under a giant multi-ton thing, or you literally think away cancer,
right?
Or you connect. There's a million examples. But instead of having nothing but the standard, like, well, I can look around and I have some explanations for it, and I'm okay with it now, I'm kind of comfortable, and I'll kind of keep exploring it. I think the more we keep tabling these finds, and the more we're honest about the frequency and energy use and the massive terraformed planet, it's like these people were like connecting us. We can more honestly look at that calcified third eye and go, I think I want it to work. And I think even that mindset, I don't know if it's going to be static. I don't know if it's going to be terrifying. I don't know if because of my upbringing, I'm going to manifest in my mind. And in reality, I'm going to manifest what I'm going to perceive as a demon, a paranormal thing, a fluffy, white, happy alien fairy. I don't know, but I'm willing to risk it because I know that it's part of a technology that's mine, that's ours, that's collective. I'm going to risk the experience, where I think now people only step so far away from what they think is a very detachable system. And what I think we're finding is that this ancient terraformed, terra preta, engineered buildings, that we're talking about a society that was so connected that when you tap back into that blinking board more consciously, I think it's would be more at ease for people. More people try, And then the more collectively we're conscious, the more RAM we have to slide into spaces individually we thought we'd never even try. And then, one meditation later, I think the experience would be, for some people, it would be, oh, that's an interesting conversation. I've never done that before. And then they try one meditation, they get where we were. And it maybe took us 2 years, and they do it in 2 minutes, from one chat, from the chat, and one super chat. That's just what you got me thinking about. You inspired me.
You're bringing up. There's one thing. Yep. I'm sorry, you were breaking up a little bit at the end there. I didn't mean to interrupt you. There's one point I'd like to bring up in just a moment, because you kind of touched upon something I thought was very interesting. But before we do that, Off-world, I did mean to get to your comment earlier. I have to be honest with you. It's a little off topic, and I wanted to get Jared's quick take on it. So that's what I'll do for the moment, just because, obviously I want to honor your question here. Very quickly, if you can briefly give him a quick answer there. He asks, with so much anti-human rhetoric in the media, which I would, further go into conversation about to clarify, but do you think it's non-humans behind it?
I think Off-World Adam has come up with a solid, we should probably talk a whole show on it. I mean, it's a worthy topic.
I was just going to say, that's a whole show right there.
Is it possible that there are people from somewhere else? Yeah, it's totally possible. Is it likely that a very advanced portion of the human race, good and bad, like janitors to scientists, we're not talking all the smartest people from the ancient past, is it possible that they're still here and are still fully conscious and can manage their bodies and what they look like? So what I would say is there groups that are embedded, or individuals that are embedded in our system now today, that represent a more ancient group that's always been on the planet, but are they not human? My suggestion to you is that they're likely human, but we would not recognize them as that way, maybe, or we would identify them automatically and say they don't look like us. But you understand how gene CRISPRs work. You understand how that there's a good chance that they can look like anything they want, but they could be a 100% perfectly human, like the Paracas. They're, but not
right.
Oddly. Yeah. What?
I just said right. Absolutely.
So but could they be non-human? Maybe, but more likely, we need to start really, really being honest with our ability to not just stick in this physical form that we're already doing body mods, and we're doing it very crudely. We're doing it with scissors, scalpels, essentially, and then now we have custom gene CRISPRs that you can set up in your garage, and you can start, you can start being Frankenstein yourself now. And I mean, there's designer babies now. I mean, like straight out of Star Trek. This is a thing. It is true. Yeah. So we're not far away from imagining. We already have F-22 pilots thinking to their weapons control and some onboard display stuff. We're not far away from being able to manipulate our genes. And I wouldn't say for the first time, I would say again. And so that singularity, that Ray Kurzweil singularity is near. It is very near. And the blurred line between nanobot, machine, Merlin magic, and, genetic programmable bodies. I mean, like you get a skin for your phone. Yeah, you snap the old one off and you snap a new cover on your phone. That's literally going to be you in the human body. I mean, remember, every cell in the human body, for everyone listening, you're literally a different person in about 6 months. All of you is replaced. There's some arguments about different parts and how frequently that is. Like, it used to be like 3 to 6 months. There's some conversation that says some, just for people out there being technical, for sure, if you don't see someone for a year, you might recognize them, but every cell in their body has been replaced. So what makes you you?
It's a great.
And we know about Carillion photography. We've talked about magnetic fields around you. That the hard drive of your individual memory, is within a holographic magnetic just basically like a flash drive, but in a field that's not just stored in your mind, that who you are and what you are. It's not just a spirit thing, but actual hard ones and zeros are stored within a field,
Mm-hmm.
not just in your brain. So, and then of course there's the collective consciousness, which we know the minute quantum mechanics really got going on beyond theory and really like working the last 40 years on actual hard testing stuff, we know there's something to it. We're just really blind on it.
100%. No, there's certainly research being done right now. I think it was oh God, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it was Jeff Bezos who might have been playing around with age regression. Certainly Wilcock has talked about this as much as you want to give that guy any stock. But, the word is out there. People are saying that the technology is available in one way, shape, or form. And, of course, this would revolutionize, who we are as human beings, at least in our understanding of what we're capable of doing and perhaps the longevity of our experience here in the physical. Now, the thing I wanted to mention very quickly, and I don't know if I've ever spoken about this on the show, but I've definitely told Rich of Gufon, and I believe I told the boys from Third Phase of the Moon about this. I may have mentioned it to you, Jared. When I was much younger, I had a firecracker go off about this far away from my left ear. This left me with more than likely some permanent damage. I mean, it's a little less on the high end, so some of the higher frequencies don't match up. I'd say probably from 20 hertz to probably about 16,000 hertz there. I'm sorry, 20,000 hertz to 16,000 hertz. It's a little bit more dull than the other ear. Now, for years, this would intermittently start to ring, or it would almost go completely deaf, or I'd have some sort of static. So when people talked, it sounded like this, so you couldn't really make it out. It sounded like it was coming through an old radio. But eventually, as I got older, this would subside. Now, I haven't had an episode where it all of a sudden started to ring, and when it would happen, my equilibrium would get thrown off as well. Right. So I'd be trying to walk around like kind of club footing, and so again, I haven't had this experience for quite some time. But what does happen on occasion is that all of a sudden I'll start getting a very small ringing in this ear. It's light at first, and all of a sudden it starts coming on full force. I can actually, and I don't know how I'm doing this because I've repeated it multiple times. I say at least 15, 20 times this has been successful. I will literally think away the sound. And the way that I'm doing this is I'm thinking about what my ear would sound like, and bear with me here, if there wasn't that ringing. So as I'm kind of focusing on just the idea that the ear is silent, I start getting the physical reaction wherein the sound starts to attenuate very slowly. Now, one of the things I've noticed is that if I lose concentration, woo comes right back. Like I'm holding it down like a balloon, like you're pushing it towards the ground. But if I focus on that, and it might take about 5-10 seconds of really focusing on it, boom, it goes away and doesn't return until the next time it decides to rear up. Could be weeks, months, could be a year. It doesn't matter. There's always this big length of time between it. Have you ever experienced anything like that? And if this is something akin to what you're talking about, we should be paying attention, I think, more to these sort of anomalies that occur within our body rather than always looking outside of us. Outside of ourselves, sorry.
I totally agree. Body consciousness, not about your opinions of your form, but being aware of how you're living and connecting to the environment requires exactly that. We wait till there's a prehab. We don't do a lot of prehab. We do a crap load of rehabilitation. We address something when it's broke. And then preventative, we think, okay, well, we need to be preventative. Common sense. They're like, well, if you would do all the preventative work, you wouldn't have to have injury or get disease or whatever. But there's something missing and when you think philosophy, you think I'm going to be present to right now, and right now I'm not in this room, I'm not on this, I'm some esoteric place, and there's so many abstract, but no, seriously, what's on your skin? How do your muscles feel? Is there ringing? Do you have weird things going on in your eyes? Do you have like a headache that never goes away?
I've tried that with the itch, though. It doesn't work with an itch.
Yeah, and
just to make the comment. Sorry.
Yeah, no, and I think that being connected to where you are and being able to be mindful of let's just say that you're dithering, right? For those listening, um, or you might have a simple goal. I want to be more flexible. I want to be able to do the splits. I want to be able to, like, I have a range of motion. I have an injury and I want my range of motion back in that item. And you're thinking, okay, there's prehab and rehab, and there's warm and cold stretching, and there's stuff that I'm going to do to get that back. But there's something about putting your mind to it. There are a zillion TED Talks on it. The power of the mind, and they try to write it off. It's kind of like saying conspiracy, placebo effect. Yet over and over and over, your mind has so much power. It can eliminate tumors. It can literally end disease. It literally in minutes with a system like the Wim Hof method, or the breathology. Again, similar techniques. You could control your inflammatory response immediately. And they're just different systems where, as you are growing, or like you said, you've lost something, if we were mindful, and because every cell in the body is replaced, and there is something to garbage in, garbage out, or good food in, good food out, what if a combination of standard exercise and eating well, but not eating well to how you think, but really like zeroing in on your body chemistry.
Right.
And there's a whole show on that we could do, but
I would love to, because I could actually use some guidance in that field.
well, we could go down that road, because it's a combo of, like, these meditations, and should I be paleo? Should I be doing this Mediterranean thing? Should it be a diet, or is it a lifestyle? Is it a lifestyle? It might be, figuring all that out. And then when you get this mindfulness, and again, it can be on an injury, it could be on an emotional thing, it could be that something's just outside of your echo and your dreams of that collective consciousness, that something keeps speaking to you. So I think there's a lot of layers. I mean, really, we could talk about this, the consciousness of mindfulness, and whether it is to be applied as like a mantra. Are you applying it literally as you move on a day-to-day basis to not just control things that are off, or to heal them, or to prehab them, or to improve them? That's the other thing. It's like, whether you're a thinker, whether it's artistic for painting or drawing or being creative, what if that meditation, in the act of meditation, you're telling your brain to grow more creative, or more conscious, or more connected? Like, you don't even know what's
control.
Right. And that might look different for everyone, but the act, or the meditation, and the process, and the ritual around how you are mindful of it and speak it and think it, all creates changes. And I'm not saying you're literally going to grow a third eye, okay? I mean, you're going to need nanobots for that, and cellular regeneration and stuff like that. But I do think there's something to it, that there's, instead of just, looking back, looking forward, but being mindful of new moles. I mean, not just checking yourself for skin cancer or something, but actually being mindful of your body and where it's at, head to toe, is something we should all do. But we don't look at it like that. We don't think about it that much. We go big picture. It's too skinny, I'm too fat, I'm just right, or I want more muscle, or I want to run faster, I want to lift more, I want to do my activity, whatever it is, sport, whatever. I want to be better at this. And then you specialize, and then should you specialize? Should you not specialize? Like Ido Portal, and now we're talking Erwin LaCour, we're talking MoveNet, we're talking these different systems that aren't about fitness, but about the global universe of movement, and that health to your body and mind, and what you then also connect to. It's this constant spiral upward. What is really, truly not your woo-woo best self, but what do you do to really make your best self, and what are the little steps you take every day?
Right. That people could really benefit, from learning about that. And if, of course, you would oblige me, I'd love to do an entire show on that with you.
Yeah, we should totally do that.
I know that I'll learn a lot too. I mean, one of the things that it's funny you mentioned this now, because I've really been thinking hard about diet. I mean, I don't eat terribly, but I don't eat the best either. I mean, now that I'm back in restaurant work, I'm eating some good seafood, so I mean, I can't complain there. But, what does the body actually need? What does it want? And I'm thinking about, people down in, different indigenous tribes in Africa, and, some of these other very tropical areas that are very much untouched by our civilizations. excuse me, for the most part.
Yeah.
And, they spend the majority of their time hunting. They're eating a very high protein diet. Very few vegetables are incorporated in this just because of what's available.
Yep.
And these people are skinny, fit, of course, because, they're traversing
Yep.
the land the way they do as well. But they live for a very long time, and they live very healthily, and they don't
Yep.
have the same long-standing diseases. So cancer and things like this are not really prevalent within that. Now, of course, there are many factors that could be attributed to that. It's not just
Right.
the way that they're living. It could be the actual food that they're eating. I mean, the absence of certain preservatives and, sodas and stuff like this that we incorporate in our diet and think, oh, I'll just have a treat myself, and really you're doing your liver some pretty tough work there, especially when you drink soda. If you guys aren't familiar with that, look it up. I do enjoy the occasional Sprite, but if you look up what this stuff does to your body, it's absolutely horrifying, and we don't think much of it. We just go about our daily lives. So, yes, I'd love to do a show with you on that specifically, again, because not only would, folks in the chat really enjoy this, I'm sure, and learn a lot, I would too. But again, it's certainly, even today I was thinking about this while I was going about my day. It's curious that you brought it up. But that being said, we are closing out to the bottom of the hour here. Of course, we know we can find you at notaliens.com, and we can find you at Not Aliens on YouTube. Is there anywhere else that we can find you? And if there's any last words that you'd like to impart, go right ahead, my friend.
Rockfin. I'm on Rockfin, and due to some new fabulous new equipment, there will be a lot of new posts coming out. And of course, like I said, let's look for that. I will start doing a regular weekly news feed on kind of all this archaeology, but kind of headlining, not letting stories drop. So we're going to try to keep digging up that search and recovery aspect of our past through a weekly consistent, more newsy format on that.
This is something that Jared had proposed to me, and he hasn't gone into enough of the detail because we're still working on putting this together for the most part. But what he's proposing in a way of following up on these stories, it's great. Third Phase of Moon does a very good job and the best of their ability. And when it comes to following up on certain things, they reach out to people. Hey, if you have more information on this, contact us. Are there other players involved? Do you know somebody? Will you talk to us? Contact us. And, it does come back. If it's there, it comes back. Now, what Jared is proposing is something even more detailed in certain ways, and as time goes on, we'll certainly reveal what that is to you in way of presentation. But I think this is going to be a very beneficial endeavor and keep a lot of these stories that would normally get cast to the wayside right fresh in our memories, so that we may continue to think about these, and perhaps, in doing that, we are going to be more prone to seeing some sort of evidence that corroborates what we're studying at that moment. And we can go further with this story. Even if we don't get anything conclusive, we can just add more beef to it. And then again, bring all these stories together. Next thing you know, you have consistencies and you do have something a little bit more conclusive. But Jared, I thank you so much for coming on the show tonight, man. I really had a fantastic time. I learned a few things from you tonight, and not that I don't learn from other guests and so forth, but I mean, there were some elementary questions in my opinion that I had asked you, but I needed that foundation to kind of understand a little bit. And the people in the chat were fantastic, obviously providing a little bit more of the peripheral explanation in way of especially the biblical flood there, which I had my Bible studies when I was a kid. I was raised Christian with a very Catholic overtone. Even today, I don't even know if it was exactly. I'm pretty sure it was Christian. But long story short, we had CCD, so I think that's Catholicism. Anyway, that being said, I really enjoyed what you put forth today. It put a few things in perspective for myself, and it gives me the impetus to move forward and start researching some of these elements that you've brought up tonight on my own time, so that we can go further into the inquiry of it all.
Yeah, thanks again for having me on, and everyone that stayed in for the chat. Really appreciate it, and the super chats. It was just really great to have everybody here tonight. Looking forward to doing this again, and then on the sites, just look for the new stuff we were talking about. Look for it on Not Aliens and Not Aliens YouTube and NotAliens.com and Not Aliens Rockfin, and we'll do this again soon.
Absolutely. Well, let me just pull up the outro here.
Oh, and my documentary that just came out. Please go watch that on YouTube.
Please,
Yes.
it's fantastic. Very, very well produced, incredibly slick, incredibly informational.
Jeez, thanks.
You will learn something. No, believe me, I really enjoyed watching that even prior to its broadcast when we were screening. It was something I was looking forward to when it was broadcasting because I still knew that there was going to be something that I would learn. And, for all intents and purposes, what it's worth, Jared, I will get you my submissions. I just I just found the write up yesterday when I was going through some things. So, we have more to certainly send out to you guys in way of what he's been working on with that documentary, and I'm sure that there's going to be more to follow on because the subject is so vast and we are so interested. So, with that being
So
said,
much
thank you,
fun.
brother. Yes. Oh, it is fun, dude.
You're
It's
welcome.
always fun. Discovering your true self, it doesn't get better than that. It leads to freedom
No.
and everything
You shouldn't
that
get bored with
entails.
that.
You shouldn't get bored with that. Right.
Yeah.
All right, brother, I'm going to take you off for a moment. You know what to do.
All right.
I'll see you in just a moment. Oh, boy. Really? I mean, these conversations that I have with Jared are always multidimensional, multifaceted. It's just incredible. And his ability to stay within the topic or to start with a question, go off, come back around and connect it to the question that was asked, even though we went out to left field a bit and pulled some more information to understand the answer that he was going to give. It's fantastic. Not everybody can do that. I can tell you that much right now. He's a natural speaker, and if I continue to do any more, his poor head might pop behind the stage, and you know what? It looks like he had a nice studio there. I don't want to make a mess of it. But you know what? Listen, guys, we're going to be back on Monday with Paula Asteria. We'll be going live at 8 o'clock Eastern Time, p.m., of course, 5 p.m. Pacific Time. And it's going to be a fantastic show. And if you guys don't know who she is or you're interested in finding out more about her, she was on Rich Giordano's show tonight on Goof On for an hour and 45 minutes. So go and check that out because I did get a chance to watch a little bit of it, but haven't seen the entirety simply because I just didn't have the time coming from the day job, coming back to the studio to get ready for the show tonight. But definitely stick around for that. You guys will not be disappointed. She's a fantastic speaker, really has a good head on her shoulders, and she's very, very well researched. So it'll be my honor to have her on Monday at 8 o'clock Eastern Time, and I hope to see you all there. Super Chatters, thank you so much for your support. Misty OC Dragons, I really appreciate it tonight. Thank you so much. You guys are awesome, and you continue to keep us afloat here at Dark Hour Paranormal. Whether you're or not, your $1.99 Super Chat accumulates, and it all goes back into the show. You guys know I'm doing some traveling out to Hawaii come this next year, and of course we have the documentary on the Bridgewater Triangle that will be put together with fantastic help from Robert Rivas in doing that. I have to say this, and I won't give you too much here, but this guy has gotten me some really pretty Christmas presents that will help us on these investigations and what we're doing in the way of that documentary. I won't say too much in the way of the equipment, but safe to say, I'm very excited for what we're going to be doing. You guys are awesome once again. Thank you so much. I hope you enjoy the rest of your night. Until next time, stay inquisitive, stay critical, and stay deeply ensconced in this beautifully nebulous field. Tonight, it was archaeology and our human history. See you Monday. Ciao.